are unconsciously incompetent in mentoring in modern times. And if we could admit that first, then we would actually be able to say, well, I better do something. How do I, step by step, in a progressive way, build these relationships back between myself and nature?
Welcome to Wild Talk Radio. I'm feeling really thankful that we have Jon Young here with us today on our 3-day Nature Connection course, which has been so nourishing for us and the group, I believe.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. I'd like to lead in maybe with Sal's question to Jon.
Yeah, nice.
As we talked with Sal Jean Corral, and he asked a question to Jon, basically asking what was the number one foundation piece that people could take away that would make a really big difference to our culture and to the level of connection that we have here.
Everybody who knows me already knows what I'm going to say. First, thanks for doing this, and appreciate all the technical support. Thank you for tuning in if you're listening or watching. We are facing a time on the planet that people are very, very disconnected. You know, they're disconnected from themselves, they're disconnected from the natural world, they're disconnected from one another as humans. And you know, the answer to Sal's question is, how do we get them connected again, really? I mean, because ultimately that's been my life's work, is trying to understand why some people are so connected in certain social groupings or cultures and other people are not. And it's really clear that the people who are not connected are creating waves and ripples that are causing a lot of problems on the planet, and causing problems for themselves too. And so the real answer to the question that Sal's asking is, what are the things that work best to get people connected most quickly and most effectively? And you know, to answer that question, I could say what those of you who know me expect me to say. Well, everyone should have a sit spot, obviously, John, right? Yes, that's what you're going to say. Yes, of course I'm going to say that. And for those people who don't know what that means, you know, a sit spot is just a place where you go regularly. It's a place where you go, preferably right outside the door where you live, and not to have this fantasy sit spot in the national park an hour's drive with this perfect view of this most amazing landscape, because that's the sit spot that you will never visit. That when we're working on connection is somewhat like exercise, that exercise is meaningless unless you do it regularly. You know, you go to the gym once and then you feel good about yourself for about a week. I went to the gym, you know, I'm feeling much better. But a month later, if you still haven't gone back, then you know the effects are now sinking down, and all you're doing is really just making yourself feel guilty for even thinking of it. Connection is happening in the nervous system. The nervous system needs routines in order for it to activate, and you know, we basically need practices, essentially. You know, and mindfulness is getting popular, and yoga is popular, and qigong and tai chi. These things are all getting popular, and that's actually a good thing for us, because these are all really old practices that come from times when people were more connected. So, you know, they're part of connected lineage. So think about the sit spot as a mindfulness practice, specifically intended to develop relationship through your nervous system to all the things that live around you. And that would be the answer to Sal's question. You know, if I was to do one thing that would make a difference, and if I could do it every day, multiple times a day even, then I would be going outside my door, maybe put a little bench outside the door, like this one we're sitting on here, very conveniently located to my house, that if I have to take a phone call and I have a choice, I could go sit on that bench and take that phone call. And that way, even though I'm in the phone call, I can also be partially paying attention, partially listening in the distance with my ears, and using my peripheral vision to take in the movement of the leaves, you know, and just reactivating my senses. And then when the little robin comes over and visits, I look over and say, hey, I wonder if that's the same robin I saw yesterday. And you know, a month later, you know it's the same robin. And now this little thread that forms between you and this bird gets thicker and thicker and thicker. You know, the goal being that we move from a place of not noticing the things around us to developing little threads of connection to them that thicken into ropes over time. And you would apply that kind of thinking to everything, not just birds, but insects and trees, and where's the moon rising now, and what phase is it in, and where's the North Star when the sun goes down, and if I'm down in the southern hemisphere, where's the Southern Cross when the sun goes down from where I'm sitting right now, and tuning into weather and seasonality and changes in position of sunrise and sunset, and just build those connections back again with the things that your nervous system is hardwired to have relationship with, As I've traveled around the world and found the grand masters of connection, the most connected people, I've found consistent patterns. These are the things that they're raising their children to be aware of, and these are the things that they've raised their children to be in connection with, and they have that priority. So, if we adopt those ancient practices, it's a lot like taking mindfulness and putting it on steroids, really. It activates the nervous system in ways that modern life doesn't call us to activate. And, you have to know that. You have to step outside yourself and think, well, what are the priorities in modern life, and how are they acting in a way that is not necessarily beneficial to my nervous system? And just be more conscious about that. I mean, you're doing that probably with things that you buy for eating, and things that you drink, and things that you add to your home. You're being conscious. I'd like to live a more conscious life, and I'd like to build in more quality in my life. And there's a trend all over the world that's happening. So add this to that trend. Add this to the list of things that you want to bring into your life to improve the quality of your life. Because more connection will improve the quality of your life. It'll slow you down. It'll cause you to make different choices. You'll become conscious of the interdependence of life systems, and you'll become a more active participant in making the world a better place. And that will emerge out of you. It's not, it's not a philosophical choice. It's not forced by environmental laws. It's something that will intrinsically emerge. Coupled with the sit spot, though, has to be telling people about your sit spot experiences, because something about our nervous system, if we have an experience with the little robin, and then we heard a participant have that aha moment, right? You remember, wow, I realized that by telling it to someone right after it happened, it sticks with me, and this is really true, and educators know this too. If we have an experience and we process it with someone else and we both get excited about it, then it's going to stick as a priority. So we say that the sit spot and the story of the day, are like this. They're not connected, they're separated. Because the experience in nature is one thing through the senses, but then the processing of that experience with people is the other half of it. And it's a positive feedback loop. So if we have the nature experience, then we find people excited to share it with us and talk about it, then it makes us want to have more nature experience. So there's a positive feedback loop. And that, that would be the answer to Sal's question, to make sure that not only are we having regular nature experience as a daily practice, multiple times a day practice, but we're also having opportunities to share with people. And the key is identifying who the people are that we're sharing with. Think about the nervous system, that there's these budding neurons that want to form, and the nervous system is pushing them up instinctively. It's like, okay, this is my ears on birds, right? And when you're 2, it's coming up like this, because it's really strong. Survival instinct in that child says, I have to know the birds and what they're saying to keep me safe, which is true. And then you go and try to tell your mom or dad about it, and that's nice, dear, or hey, we're getting ready to eat dinner, put your toys away and come inside. What happens is that this potential collapses, and then the nervous system prunes that one away. And so we literally mute down the senses of our children by not catching their stories. And then if, at the age of 2 and 4 and 5, this is the feedback we've been getting from the people around us, on an unconscious level, we're telling ourselves that having relationships with the animals and the plants and the stars and the moon is not a priority. And our nervous system happily complies with that because it's taking cues from the culture, really. And then we basically dumb down our nervous system, and it never actually habituates into its full potential. And that's why these things are important. If you're in healthy cultures where people are super connected to themselves, to nature, to each other, you're finding that when a child has an experience, there's a grandmother who sees it happen and processes it right there, drops down to the height of that child, looks in their eyes with wonder, and really engages with a good bunch of questions and curiosity around that child's experience. And then the child feels, affirmed. Ah, that was important. I knew it was important. And now those neurons, they open up like this. So you might think of my hand coming up with a partial fist as the budding nervous tissue wanting to grow out, and then the hands of the village, the grandmother reaching down, grabbing those fingers, stretching them and pulling them, and that's an effective and healthy culture. So this is a simple and small thing. It's really interesting how many barriers internally we have to that, and even though I can say this and tell you that this is definitely the answer, and I could tell it to very smart people who even write it down, tomorrow nothing changes, which I'm more curious about. Like, why? What is the unconscious critical mass message that prevents us from actually engaging in something as simple as what I just described? And I don't know the answer to that yet, but I am researching that. There's been a lot of sociological and psychological research. What are the barriers to nature connection? Why are people not connecting? The biggest one identified was fear in parents. It's not safe for my child to be outside. They might get stung. They might get kidnapped. Something terrible might happen. I feel a lot better knowing that they're right there in the living room. And yeah, I know screen time isn't so great. The headline I read last night was that children under 5, 1 hour a day of screen time is maximum now. All the health professionals. And older children, 2.5 hours a day. But right now, what's true is 7 hours a day. That's what people have come to. And they're saying, as I am saying, it isn't screens alone that are causing the problem. It's the dependence that we have on them, and parents feeling safer knowing that their child is in the other room, watching a video or playing a video game. At least I know where he or she is, and I can relax. So that was identified as the biggest barrier to connection, was fear on the part of parents. The second big one was access. I don't have access to wild spaces, wild places. And what I'm saying is that access is really a state of mind. And, sitting on this little porch right here, I have access. I have access to the wind, to the leaves, to the little birds that are flying around. And even in the city, this is true, because you see the interaction of pigeons and predatory birds, peregrines and accipiters. And you can have all these experiences in the city, and I know this, though people would, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, oh, I'll be nature connected when I finally move to the country and have that ideal space. That's the same thing as saying my sit spot is going to be in the national park, an hour's drive from here. It's the perfect sit spot. So their access is the second biggest barrier. And then the other barriers, as you go down, one that I found interesting was a psychological condition that comes from children bonding with a place, making, little magical fairylands and building little things and, developing relationships with the plants and the insects and all that, and having a magical relationship as children. And then their parents buying the house that they were dreaming of and moving that child to this place without processing that shift. Yeah. And then the child won't connect in the new place because they're afraid. They don't want to feel the hurt and the loss of that last place again. So they don't risk connecting again. So that's these are sort of shadowy things, but they're there. So just thinking about what role we can play to inspire each other. And I recommend to people that, don't go have a sit spot and then tell the first person you meet all about it, because they may not want to hear your story. And then you're kind of right back to being the 2-year-old being rejected, right? Yeah. So try to find people who are willing to go on this journey with you, How do you do that? Well, get them to watch this little podcast, or listen to this podcast with you, and then have a conversation about it. Hey, maybe we should just buddy up, and I call it that, nature buddies, find someone to have adventures with and then talk story with, and that makes a huge difference. So long answer to Sal's question, but I think it's an important question. I appreciate Sal for that question.
Yeah.
That leads me really to ask a little bit about the importance of mentorship. So as you were explaining the kind of the budding,
yes,
and then how to meet that, because my observation, especially in the education world, that mentorship is lost, and it's more about imparting information,
right,
rather than drawing out
right
the best from people.
Well, I mean, the definition of education is to lead out or to draw out. But having been a classroom teacher and environmental educator, we're not often given the support we need to actually draw out. You know, if I'm alone as an earth science teacher and there's 30 young people in the room with me, I really don't have the ability to draw out 30 children. And there's a few children in the room who become really interested in maybe the topic, and then they'll sit next to my desk after class and talk to me for an extra 5 minutes. You know, and these are the moments of mentoring I remember as a high school teacher. You know, they weren't consistent, and I really, as a mentor, had to let go of my need to mentor every child, because there was this terrible feeling inside me, like I can't help all of them, and it felt really sad for me, because I had been mentored from early boyhood, both by my elders, my grandparents, both my father's and mother's side, who still had the instincts of mentoring as grandmothers. And then, when I was 10, I had this magnificent mentor who was himself in a lineage of mentoring that stretches back to the beginning of time. So I was blessed in that way. And then I was also, you know, mentored for so long. You know, all these things, the nervous system things, were pulled out in me, that I was very instinctively mentoring others when I was older. And then I realized that, well, most people haven't had that experience, and they don't even know that that's possible. And I see that as a huge gap right now. And when you mention mentoring, it's a word that has been branded in modern times. And I don't, you know, I want to stay positive here, but I have to say that the branding of mentoring has actually muted it for what it really is. Because, you know, as you said, you know, the nervous system doing this and the grandmother pulling the child into a deeper relationship with that instinct or that sensory experience is mentoring. That is mentoring. We wrote Coyotes' Guide to Connecting with Nature to shine a light on mentoring and all of its complexities and what's possible. So if you haven't tuned into that resource, you know, it is available electronically if you can't find a hard copy of the book. But, you know, the Coyotes' Guide to Connecting with Nature by Ellen Haas, Evan McGowan, and myself, Jon Young, is out there. And it actually does a lot to explain mentoring in detail, so you could dig in there. However, just for the sake of those of you who won't chase down that book and are still curious about mentoring, mentoring has come to mean, oh yeah, I had mentoring at work. I was a mentor, and the new guy that came into my department, I, you know, showed him where the copy machine was, and you know, how to work the coffee maker, and you know, how to deal with HR. You know, it's a little tricky, and yeah, she gets a little grumpy now and again, but you know, it's not you. Don't take it personally. You know, people get, and that isn't really mentoring. That's more like facilitating or guiding, right? And mentoring, if I was going to give you a definition of it from the really connected culture standpoint, I would say mentoring is looking at all of the senses. So if you were mentoring a child in a very healthy culture, your responsibility would be, well, that child talks a lot about what they see, but I don't hear them talking about what they hear. And I know that that child has normal hearing. They can hear fine, so it isn't like they're impaired in some way. So my job as the mentor is to get them to tell me more about what they hear, not what they see. Because I want to hear in their story that they're talking about listening and the birds and the sounds they're making. And eventually adding, you know, sense of smell and taste, sense of direction, you know, sense of emotion in the body, the feeling of anxiety when they're around the birds that are nervous about the predatory hawk. And making that child more and more aware of their own internal blind spots and getting them to pull up more of their sensory information. So there's that layer of activating all the senses is one job of a traditional mentor. And then the second layer is connecting the senses to all of the beings around us, the trees, the birds, the animals, the insects, the stars, the sun, the moon, the clouds, the weather, the wind, and how those things all interrelate. And mentoring is always done by listening really well to other people's stories and then asking really good questions. And a lot of people are intimidated by that. Well, I'm not an expert on nature, so I'll never be a mentor. But actually, good news. When you listen to someone else tell a story and you become curious about what they're talking about, and it's an authentic sense of curiosity, it's not, you know, you're really genuinely interested, then if you ask from that place, you're actually providing a mentoring space, you know, because maybe they didn't think of that. So you're already pulling them into their blind spots just by being curious, you know. So we can get mentoring back quickly, but what I recommend to people is co-mentoring. So if you're working in buddy pairs, then what you're going to do is go out, have experiences together, and then ask each other questions and listen to each other from that authentic, curious place. And you both might find yourself saying, well, gee, I don't know what that bird was or what it was saying. And now out come the field guides, right? So with that curiosity, you start flipping through and you say, narrow it down to 5 birds. Well, tomorrow you're going to want to go right back to that place again. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow you're going to have that bird experience again, and you get a better look this time, and you'll see the 2 white wing bars really clearly. And then you'll go in and you'll narrow it down to 2. Mm-hmm. Then the next day you'll go and you'll nail that bird, and you'll say, it's definitely this one, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a feeling of like accomplishment and, yeah, you know, I got a little rope to that species now, and then it starts to lead to other questions. But, you know, really simply by sharing stories and being authentically curious and giving space to that, we can get mentoring back again. So the other thing I wanted to say about mentoring is that, you know, if you think of a culture as a living set of Legos, you know, that are all swirling around us, right? In a healthy culture, all of the Legos are designed to pull us deeper into our connection, right? Mm-hmm. If you took one of those Legos, what would it be defined as? And I would say that the smallest unit of culture is mentoring. Mm-hmm. You know, like the actual act of mentoring mm-hmm. is the smallest unit. And that a really healthy culture that connects people very effectively is a system of mentoring relationships. You know, let me give a little contrast: modern versus you know, old traditional indigenous cultures. If you're in the San Bushmen culture, and these are some of the most connected people I've worked with on the planet, every child is born into a mentoring system. Every child has multiple aunts and uncles. Every child has older brothers and sisters and older friends. They've got grandparents. And all of those people are intrinsically skilled at mentoring because they all grew up being mentored. So a child might be born with 25 to 35 mentors. Mm. On any given day that child has an experience, there'll be at least 3 strong mentoring moments from one of those 25 to 35. And that will follow that child through into their teen years, beyond into their adulthood, and when their parents, you know, the aunties and uncles are now the elders of the village. And I've heard it consistently said that even when the elders pass away that were mentors, they still have moments where that the voice of that mentor is in their head, you know, still mentoring them, you know. And I have that experience with my mentors who are now passed on as well. So you're looking at a lifetime of mentoring with multiple mentors. And then when you survey modern people and you ask them, when you describe what mentoring is, and you ask them, have they had that? They'll say, gee, I can't remember that. Or I had that one soccer coach, and that was great. And for 2 years, they were in my life in that way, and they knew me as a person, and they asked me good questions, and they helped me to grow through my own blocks. And they might have 1 or 2 examples of that lasted a year or 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. People who study martial arts will recognize that the other people in the martial arts dojo were mentors to them, you know, which is accurate. But it's so rare now to find people with any more than a couple of stories like that. And so it really is a big contrast, you know, between modern quote-unquote culture versus these ancient cultures, which are essentially built of mentoring relationships. Mm. So I think we lost a lot when we lost mentoring, and it would be well worth bringing back for sure. Mm-hmm. It enhances everything.
So if we were aiming towards a healthy culture, that's something that we wanted to create, what would be some of the key steps that you could advise people to, as a start point, to start to recreate these healthy pockets?
Well, besides the restoration of the loss of mentoring, so if we could become conscious of what mentoring is and really study it, step out of ourselves and realize, number one, we are unconsciously incompetent in mentoring in modern times. Mm-hmm. And if we could admit that first, then we would actually be able to say, well, I better do something about that. Yeah. So that would be the first thing to do. And then to study mentoring. You know, again, Coyotes Guide would be a great resource for that, to really think about, you know, how do I step by step in a progressive way build these relationships back between myself and nature? And then how can I reach out to and adopt as friends, or for my nephews and nieces and my family, to be that auntie-uncle figure for them and help them grow out. And for my own children, how can I support them to have that relationship also? that would be one place to start. The other place would be to realize that, healthy cultures are always layered. In modern times, we tend to put all the 9-year-olds together, and we put all the 15-year-olds together. But in all the healthy cultures, there's mixes of ages, and everybody's with everybody. You've got 4, 5 generations. A lot of times when you're with these healthy cultures, you've got all these different generations. So in this little project that we have going globally, we call it village building. We basically look at that and we say, how can you hack that and get that back again? And it might be as simple as building relationships with some older people in your life, building some relationships with peers that are in your rough age group, and then other families that have children of mixed ages, and just getting together for potlucks regularly and creating space around that time so that we can hang out together and get to know each other. And I think one of the big things is that adults don't trust each other anymore. So looking at that and asking, well, what can I do to restore my trust in other adults? Because there's a lot of lack of trust in modern times, and just building relationships over time, and then creating a lot of space around the children. Let them go play as mixed mobs, and sort of keep an eye on them, but don't hover over them and don't micromanage them, and just let them find themselves and their rhythms again, and their nervous system will kick in. And when they come back in all hungry and looking for food, interact, catch their stories, start asking questions. And it comes back remarkably fast, and all over the world. I go and visit places even like this one here where I am now with you two, where you can feel that village returning quite organically, just from the fact that you're running regular programs for children outside, and the parents are starting to scratch their heads like, wow, this feels good, and then now the parents are here with us this week, which is amazing, and I highly recommend that to anybody out there who's running children's program. Do connect the parents as well, and help the parents see what role they can play as uncles and aunts to the other children. And why do I keep saying that? Because consistently I hear from Indigenous people, as a parent, it's hard for me to mentor my own children. And I rely on my brother or my sister or my mom to do the mentoring of my children, because I have a conflict of interest as a parent. And my job wants to be to love my children, and when they need discipline, for my uncle to do that. And it's such a conflict for modern parents, especially when we live in these isolated nuclear families. We have to be, parent and teacher and mentor. It doesn't really work. The nuclear family is a failed experiment, if you ask me. It puts way too much pressure, unrealistically, on the parents. And it's not how we're hardwired. We're literally hardwired for the village. So, these would be ways to bring that back.
I'd love to hear of your work with the Bushmen in Botswana and the Kalahari, and I have so much gratitude for you and the service that you're offering them, actually, in trying to find a way to maintain their culture in a way that works for them, because we see all around the world these indigenous cultures that are now starting to lose their own cultures, and what I believe you bring is a way to integrate that into the modern world in a way that works for both parties. And that's such a gift. And we were talking the other night about the Bushmen's vision for what they wanted.
Right.
I'd love to hear that.
So I'm working with a mixed group of Bushmen, and they're not all from the same lineage. They're not all from the same language group. But they are unified and intentional in that they recognize that hanging on to their culture is a priority for them. And they've all come to that choice on their own. And so, they speak 5 different languages, but they've all adopted one of those dialects, and they use that one in common. They deliberately didn't use English or other languages that come from the European colonial influences or the other African tribal colonial influences. They wanted to make it Bushman. So that was one of the things that they agreed on, core values-wise. This is what we're about. The other thing was that they knew that the village was important, and that they would work together to cooperatively help raise the children. So, they're aware, especially some of the elders there who have never known any other lifestyle than the Bushman lifestyle. And some of the younger people have gotten into the service industry, or they're working on farms, or maybe they're doing road work. But they're also aware that there's a value in their staying together, and there's maybe 65 of them that have agreed on this project, and we're working to, create a cultural education center that they'll be part of the management of, and they'll be running cultural ecotourism. The partner that helps me with this project, she got her PhD, and does cultural ecotourism increase the cultural knowledge of the Bushmen, or does it shrink it? And the research has proven pretty much that they coming together and forming this intentional village and this intentional project around education and cultural tourism has returned their pride in their own culture, and they've become more consciously aware of what their culture is and how it works. Mm-hmm. So they're now more aware of the moving parts and pieces that they need to keep an eye on. Mm-hmm. They don't lose those. Mm-hmm. And because I've since 1979, I've been researching elements of effective culture, essentially, and the Bushmen were the center of my study for a long time. And a lot of the things that the movement of nature, deep nature connection, mentoring, that's all over the world now, based on Coyotes Guide, is really based on Bushman cultural technology, essentially. Mm-hmm. So to work with the Bushmen and reflect back to them, hey, I see you doing this with the children. Why are you doing that? And they'll say, well, my grandmother did that with me. That's why I do it with them. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, but don't lose that one, because that one's important, because that's the one that's missing for all the rest of us around the world. And they'll say, how could you live without that? And I'll say, well, that's a good question. And I think most modern people would agree, if you ask them in the right moment, that maybe they don't feel like they're living. Maybe they feel like they're compromised and that they wish they were living better. And mm-hmm. they can't because the village is missing. Because there's you probably know, an epidemic of loneliness now that's making headlines all the time now. There's this huge thing going on with loneliness, and it's contributing to the World Health Organization statistics that people who feel lonely and identify as lonely are more likely to die younger, for a whole host of reasons. So the loss of meaningful connection with other humans is not just a nature connection issue, it's also an individual well-being issue. And the Bushmen are aware of that because, this particular community, some of them have gone and lived in these settlement situations and have found that isolation and have come to realize this is not working for me for a lot of reasons. And they come back to this community and they get back involved, and that, their lights come back on, and they're like, this is what I need, Mm-hmm. So they're aware of the importance of their culture, and they're now becoming really conscious of asking the question, what is our culture? What are the parts and pieces that are moving? And I've been really excited to help ask good questions with them and to think about it. And then they're saying, but our young people, they're going to have to be able to integrate into the modern world, and they're going to have English, and they're going to have other languages, and they're going to have to be fluent in technology. And the younger people are saying, well, we're really excited to have the technology so my grandmother here can stay in touch with John on the other side of the world through Skype mm-hmm. or through other means. And I want to really help her have that, which of course would enhance the project greatly. And so, the different generations have different priorities. But they all want to work together to imagine a school that is using Bushman learning style and connection modeling so the whole family can learn English together. The whole family can do things together. And they said, can we run a school that's more befitting to our Bushman lifestyle? And as I've mentioned that to different communities around the world, can I help with that? I want to be there. That sounds great, So, there's this nice collaboration going on. And what they're also willing to contribute on behalf of modern people is like, well, they're just horrified that we don't have that anymore. Like that we've lost mentoring, that we've lost our village, that we've lost our connection to nature. And they're asking the question, well, how can you even live like that? And then one time an elder stood up and she got very emotional when it suddenly occurred to her the lives of, as Thoreau said, quiet lives of desperation that people are living. Mm-hmm. She's like, how can people live like this? And, that's when I offered, maybe they actually don't feel like they are. And she said, well, we can help with that, so they're committed to even helping as collaborators and instructors and appearing in media and things like that to help show parents little things they can do to get the mentoring back in the family. And they're excited to do that. They're saying, when can you bring the cameras? We want to get right to work. Mm-hmm. And, since this project has started, we've lost 3 elders already, that have passed on. They're not going to hang around forever. And they are a treasure trove of wisdom on how to hold the culture together. There's still a number of elders left, and there's some younger elders that are transitioning into that responsibility well. So I don't feel like this immediate desperation, but I'm excited to be collaborating with them. on this project. You know, it's like a global reconnection project.
Yeah, nice.
The thought of Skyping a Bushman.
Yeah.
There's something magical in that.
Yeah.
Really, really special. One other question I wanted to ask. I heard you mention an experience that you had that really tested your own nervous system with an elephant. I'm curious.
Well, I went over there for the first time thinking it would be all about lions and that I would be terrified of lions, you know. And when I met my first lion, Pride, I suddenly realized they actually it felt like there was an agreement with the lions and the humans, you know, like they weren't going to bother us. And as long as we didn't bother them, then it was very interesting. I was quite surprised that the lions didn't make me as freaked out as I thought they would. And even when they were roaring at sunset, and just the beauty of that and the way that resonated in my body, I actually found that I was quite at peace with the lions. And having Bushmen around helped that too, because they're quite at peace with the lions also. But it was a rogue male elephant that, you know, got the mating instinct and was in this herd with females and, you know, daughters, you know, the old females and the daughters and the sons, and then they want to mate, but it's like, no, not now, not here, and then they get driven away from that herd. And that's kind of like their family that they're being driven away from, so they get really, really pissed.
Sure.
And then they just go through the woods, you know, in a real bad mood, and they have these glands on their head, and the must is dripping down, and, you know, they're really agitated. And they're just looking for anything to just bash, you know. And we were on foot trailing a leopard when we started to smell this really fresh elephant must mixed in with the urine, and there was really fresh tracks. And the walking guide that we were with was getting kind of nervous, and he was whispering to me on the side that this was not a good situation. That camp was right at those gray trees over there. Can you see those dead trees? That's where camp is. I'm going to send you with everyone to that place, and I'm going to go that way and make this elephant chase me to buy you guys time. I'm just like, whoa. And we tested the wind. We figured out which way the wind was blowing, and we walked. And at one point, I looked through the Mapani scrub, and there was that elephant. And the guide hadn't seen it yet because of the Mapani was in his way. I saw it first, and then I stopped him and I said, "It's right there," you know. So then I had to go back and whisper to everybody, we're going to crouch down really low, and we're going to go this way, and then we're going to run in this low crouch along, hidden behind these bushes, right after our friend, the guide, bursts through the Mapani and makes a big loud noise and goes that way. And that was what we did, but that was a very tense moment. And everyone got into camp safely, and then I was like, okay, what happened to our guide? You know, like 15 minutes later, he comes strolling into camp, like another day in the bush. And what he had done was he got the elephant's attention, ran through the brush, and as soon as he got through the brush, he ducked down and ran sideways, and then went on the same route we did. So the elephant just burst through the brush and kept running in a straight line as if he had run and kept going. So he used a little bit of psychological medicine on the elephant. But that was the most nervous I ever felt in the bush in Africa, was when we were facing that.
I can imagine.
You know? Yeah.
They go big.
Yeah, and you were talking yesterday a little bit about the children in the bush and when they grow up, and how having to have that level of awareness, how it shifts the focus, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was really aware. I was doing I was traveling with them for about 2 weeks, and we were looking at Bushman knowledge of bird language, bird and animal language. And what occurred to me, you know, I've been teaching bird language all over the world, and I know it's one of the power tools of reconnection. And even though there's communities where the adults are really excited about bird language, and they're doing bird sits together regularly, and they're really advancing in their bird language knowledge, when there's a bird alarm, the children don't notice it. And I have to get the children to notice it. I don't tell them, hey, listen to the bird alarm. I look at the children and they look at me. And then they're like, Jon Young's looking at us. We're supposed to notice something, you know? And the older, smarter kid is kind of looking at me, trying to make it out. Looks in my eye and kind of looks around, tries to figure out, oh, and then here's the bird alarm. And then looks at me, and I'm like, yep. Now he feels all smug. You know, and then this gal notices that he feels smug, so she looks at him, she looks at me, and then she notices the bird alarm, and then, okay, now she's smug. Now there's two smug kids, and slowly all the kids become aware, and then there's that one kid who's just like clueless, and everyone laughs when they go, what? Yeah. But, you know, if that was a real danger, like if that was a rogue elephant, or if that was a leopard, or if that was, you know, lions or something, or a poisonous snake, you know, we don't have the luxury to go through that very slow response, recognition of a pattern. That would definitely doom our children. And then when I'm with the Bushmen, you know, and I noticed that a bird alarm goes off, and 19 children who are standing in front of me simultaneously turn and look. And they're varying in age from like 3 or 4 to, you know, preteen. And I became very curious, how did the Bushmen, get their children so incredibly dialed into their senses? Because that's what we would call sensory integration. They have the highest level of sensory integration. In neurobiology, occupational therapy, they say emotional regulation. In other words, our health and happiness, our well-being, our functionality as adults. Emotional regulation. That's our goal for our children. We want them to be emotionally regulated. It sits on the foundation of sensory integration. So if we don't have solid sensory integration, then we don't have emotional regulation. And there's a lot of kids, you know, over 30% of children are showing up to primary school in modern countries now dysregulated. In other words, they haven't received enough sensory integration. So the occupational therapists would be out of work in the Bushman community because the children are so highly integrated, like extraordinarily so. And the lessons that, you know, we could learn from understanding how do these family systems bring about such highly refined sensory integration that results in really confident, really aware, really alert, really independent children. Because the investment that the Kalahari parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles have in the children is to make them incredibly attuned so that they make good choices. And that's how they keep them safe. They're not hovering over them, helicopter style, like modern parents, trying to keep them safe from everything. It's quite the opposite. They're teaching them to experience their world in a profound sensory way, asking good questions until they make good decisions for themselves, and then the parents can relax. Like, that's the investment. But that's also, the benefits of that are also that they have this incredible sensory integration and then really healthy, happy minds. And if you think about depression and anxiety in children today and the teen suicide epidemic, you know, the answer to this is give them what the Bushman children have and they will become emotionally regulated. And I know a lot of people won't see that connection, but I understand that connection because I've been doing this work for 40 years and I see children who come to us, parents worried about them, they're going to therapy, they're not making progress, they're slowly spiraling down and getting darker and sadder, and the parents are worried. And then they come into our Nature Connection programming and we get them hooked up to bird language and we get them into tracking and we get them into using their senses in that way, and they magically pull out of the nosedive and everyone says we got lucky, you know, but we've been 100% lucky, right? So it's not luck, there's a pattern to this. And you know, the Bushmen have their strategies of how they're getting their children that completely connected and that alert through their senses. And you know, that's my interest, is capturing that, getting that out to many communities as we can globally, finding out how to apply these things in modern settings, because, you know, people are hearing, oh, that means we all have to go live in the wild again. No, it doesn't mean that at all. And, you know, what I started out by saying in the very beginning was that go outside your door and build that relationship through your sit spot, bring your whole family along with you, and get everybody celebrating sensory integration together. And, you know, that can happen in the city as it can in the deep wilderness, and needs to, really, frankly.
One question that we ask all of our guests is there a moment that you've had, and I'm sure you've got a host, but if you could try and search for the one which made the biggest difference for you as a person, something that you saw that was made a really big shift for you?
I know that moment, but it wasn't one moment. There was something that led up to it, where that moment was a inflection point in my life.
Sure.
You know, like when I hit that moment, I recognized it, and then I made different choices after that. And that, since 1979, I've been on that trajectory, you know, from that moment, and I know that moment. What led up to it was I'd been mentored by Tom Brown. You know, he hadn't written any books. He wasn't this famous guy, you know. He was 21 years old. He was living up the street. He was a neighbor. And I was a kid. I was 10 years old when I met him, and I liked fishing, and I liked being out in the woods catching stuff. And he just took that passion that I had and that curiosity that I had, and he worked it through the successive layering of mentoring, through sensory development and relationship with all the beings, and then skills on top of that. And I didn't actually sign up for that program. You know, it wasn't like my mom and dad were like, well, is there any nature connection mentorings in the neighborhood? God would sign my son up for that. Oh yeah, Dad, I really want to do that. I actually didn't even know I was on a mentoring journey because he was that clever. He was just using this really old style of mentoring. So by the time I was 18, I knew all the language of the birds around me, little realizing that no one else did. I didn't know that you couldn't know that, and that was like my awakening when I got to college and I was studying natural history and environmental science at a school where everyone signed up for that. So I thought, oh, this is going to be so fun. All these people will share my passion and my knowledge, and we'll be able to do stuff together. But I found that all of a sudden, like, I was the only one who knew bird language and the only one who knew tracking, and I was so confused. How come I know this and nobody else does? Isn't there a Tom Brown in every neighborhood? Like, isn't there one, you know, like that's what I actually literally innocently thought. And right then, Tom Brown wrote his first book, The Tracker. So I was a freshman in college, sort of waking up to the fact that I was all by myself in terms of my knowledge and skill. The professors told me, it's impossible. You can't know bird language. Nobody knows bird language. Nobody. And that was the first time someone told me I couldn't know. But I already knew that I could know because it was predictable. If I saw the birds behave this way, I knew a sharp-shinned hawk was coming. If they were behaving that way, I knew it was a Cooper's hawk. If they were behaving that way, I knew it was going to be the red fox. You know, like, these things I knew. You couldn't take them from me, even if no one believed that I knew that. And the reason I knew that was because I had great mentoring. But I didn't know, literally, that I was going on that journey, honestly. So that made me very, very curious. Why do I know this and nobody else? And when I got to the tracker school for the first time, and Tom had written his first book, and the first group of people showed up in this barn that we had worked on to prepare it and put benches in it and made it ready and put a whiteboard up, you know, and Tom was going to teach the first class in that barn. And there was 65 people or so, and the license plates in the parking lot were from all over the US and Canada. And I was fascinated by that, you know, because he was the guy up the street. And now there was all these people coming from all over the place to see this guy who was the guy up the street. And I noticed in the beginning of the week, people showed up in one sort of mental state. And there was a lot of mistrust of each other. There was a lot of kind of posturing. You know, I've got the cool camouflage hat. I'm a hunter. I know my stuff. You know, and what's this guy going to teach me? You know, there's all that kind of stuff right in the beginning, and all this insecurity and posturing going on. And I noticed by the end of the week, the light was on in everybody's eyes, and there was this softness to their faces, and their hearts had opened. And there was this real beauty in the collective in that barn from all these people who were strangers and even a little bit antagonistic in the beginning of the week. That all that dynamic had gone away, and they had found common bonding in something that I couldn't put my finger on. But I said to myself in that moment, I'm like, whatever it was that happened here this week, between the first day and the last day, that turned that light on and opened up those hearts, whatever that was, that's what I want to give the rest of my life to. And then I flipped my research in college, and I started studying mentoring in traditional cultures to see if I could identify what was the secret sauce that my neighbor used on me without me knowing. You know, and can we scale it? And can we get it to as many as possible on the planet in the shortest possible timeline?
Nice.
And that's what I've been doing since 1979. That was 40 years ago.
Wow.
Almost.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's been a journey, and really grateful for that moment, actually, because that's why we do what we do.
Exactly. Yeah, it's been very inspiring. And that's something that I feel in my heart. Something that, you know, I really hope to see more children and adults connecting and creating these healthy cultures.
Yeah, like we've been watching for the last 2 days.
Yeah.
How simple it was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? How beautiful.
That's my love of this work as well, is its simplicity. And I think it's this, what I call it, the inner indigenous within that just feels this work
Mm-hmm.
in a level, and you see it in the eyes of the people that we have here today. It's just from where they were when they began to now, and they're just lit up. It's great.
And then let's project 5 years into the future. These parents who now suddenly realize what you two have been up to with their children for however long, a year or two, now they're complicit. Now they're helping. Now they're collaborating with you to help their children.
Yeah.
So the thing that blows me away about this movement now is that I'm now meeting people in their 20s and 30s who were those children.
Oh, nice.
And they are the light of the future. I mean, these children on virtually every continent except Antarctica, there's kids that are growing up not even knowing that the other children don't have this opportunity. They're just taking for granted, oh, yeah, I was born into a healthy ecosystem for my nervous system, and they just are completely killing it from a nature connection perspective. It's super inspiring to me. That's what lights me up, is meeting the children who are downstream from you two. You know, because so many of the adults that I worked with in the 1990s when we first started teaching this model out to adult communities, they were all, oh, I'm not good enough to do this for the children. Nobody did this for me. I didn't have Tom Brown up the street, and oh, woe is me. I have nothing to offer these children, you know? And yet they show up anyway, and they do it anyway, right? And they make that commitment, and week by week these children go on a journey, and then the adults start to realize, oh wow, this is possible. And then the elders start to show up in that community, and then, you know, there's more and more coherence, and this little village grows around this. And, you know, 20 years later, those adults that said it's not possible, you know, now have gray hair, and they're the elders, and they're so on it, you know. So that's a really hopeful story that I've seen all over the planet. You know, we can do this. Culture repair, we call it. Yeah.
We also have a question from Sal's visit, because he brought another friend of yours, Feathers, and Kira as well. And they both asked a very simple and humble question, which I'd like to echo as well, really, is what can we do to help you, Jon, with your mission to take over the world?
To restore connection for every human on the planet, and get them back into that full connection. How can they help me, or how can anyone help me? I think, you know, we spent the last 10 years between 2007 and 2017 doing a retrospective. We were tracking the impact of the years prior all over the world, and we were doing all this survey work, and we were doing all this research, and we were asking the question, can we take this project and can we scale it? And the big question, how do we scale mentoring? Because mentoring doesn't seem scalable on the surface. And it is tricky. You know, and I told Peter Slenska, the McKinsey and Company consultant that was retired from that job but was using his consulting skills to help our movement. And he volunteered for 3.5 years and put an amazing amount of time and energy and brought all kinds of experts together to help us. And he said, mentoring is not scalable, and I think that's your biggest obstacle. And I said, yes, it is. Tom Brown mentored me, and then I mentored 200. So he'd already scaled. And then he said, well, what about the 150 million who know they need it right now and can't find it? I'm like, oh, that's what you mean by scalable. Okay, right, got it. Yes, big problem. But we worked it out with, you know, a lot of research and a lot of, you know, working with different experts in different fields. We found ways to scale mentoring fairly massively, and you know, we spent the last year building organization around that, and in the coming year or two, we will have a global launch of our work. And so what I'd really appreciate is keep asking that question, how can you help me? Because I'm really doing this to help all of us. You know, I'm not doing this for me, and I never have. I really want this to work for all of us because we need it to, frankly. So please just stay on our mailing list, you know, aidshields.org, and watch for announcements, you know, because we're starting to build global councils right now. You know, there'll be 8 at least 8 major global council categories, and we're going to need people, elders, experienced practitioners from a variety of specialties around the 8 Shields model. And we need people to populate those councils from all over the world and be willing to get into what we call the global in-breath, out-breath, where we have, semi-weekly conversations where questions are pulsed out, and then we go to our communities and we ask our friends and other people that we know in our movement, and then we pull that answer back, and then it goes back to the global council, and then it gets back to the R&D team. And that what we really want is for there to be a global in-breath, out-breath, and for everyone to be involved in that, because it's a global conversation and it requires everybody's insights. So for instance, some very experienced people from the 8 Shields network been at this since the early 2000s, and actually earlier than that. I got to know them in the early 2000s. They just had this whole realization about competition, like, I have a student that I've been mentoring for the last 10 years, and now he wants to start a school right in the same neighborhood as me. Now he's competing with me, and it was creating all this negativity. And, she really reflected on this, and she talked to a lot of people in the European region, German-speaking countries, about it. And she had a whole vision come to her about a way to create a sense of family among all of us, and that how would we feel if I am the mother school and this is my daughter. If I was the mother and she was the daughter, what would I want for my daughter? Would I see her as competition? Right? And she flipped the whole thing, in this core value way based on love and connection. And that innovation impacted the entire movement globally, and because a lot of communities were struggling under that. And so as innovation happens, it would be really helpful if it could get back to the center and then be distributed again back out to the whole network, so that as we learn, we can really share. So that would be one way. Please be involved, stay in touch, read our newsletters, and keep your ear to the ground. And when we say, hey, we need your help, jump up and help us, because there's going to be some moments coming where we literally need people to roll up their sleeves and pick a piece of this up and carry it a little bit, because for 10 years, I was sort of the lead researcher, and I was kind of the last one left standing at the end. Thankfully, we got some funding from some people who were like, wow, thank God you hung in there for that. This is really important. And we got a little bit of support that helped us to get through the last couple of years. But, we really need there to be a village, a global village cooperating. And we'd like you to think of yourselves as members of that global village, and that as a village, we all have responsibility at our different ages and stages of life for the well-being of the whole village. So think of yourself in that way, and stay involved and stay in communication. And then when we call for help, try to respond. Even if all you say is, I heard you, and I want to help you, and I really support you, and I will figure out a way to help you. That's good enough. Just I want to know you heard me, and that you're there, because I think from there we'll get it sorted. And thank you for asking. And of course, keep going to your sit spot, and keep inspiring people to do the same. That would be the other way you can help me.
Thanks so much, John. Thanks for sharing. Thank you for this time.
Yeah, thank you so much for this time.
I really love traveling around the world and dropping in with folks like you, and just watch what you're doing, and then contribute in ways that I can, and just to see the effect it's having on the families is really inspiring. It keeps me going. So thank you both.